8:30 to 6:30.
This is an interesting setup.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I know lots of people do that, but I wouldn't do
Plus
that. Most of the
this,
time,
yeah.
So,
I'm good,
you
thanks.
know, like 9 is my limit, 9 hours or whatever,
Yeah.
so.
Is it?
It's okay.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Yes.
so there's extra tables now,
Yeah.
which makes it, do we want to give them the
Morning.
table?
Hi.
And
Good morning.
make it fatter again?
I'm a little discombobulated, yeah.
You want to change it?
Yeah, but,
Right? Like this feels sort of like we're very distant.
yeah, it feels like a boardroom instead of a community
Yeah, they made it live, didn't they?
conversation. Yeah, they added a table, it looks
Yeah.
like. But we would,
Technician said his boss
this,
wanted it
oh
this
no,
way.
and then we have these two that are impacted, right, so.
It just feels like very.
Oh, it's a whole thing in the, yeah, it doesn't look easy. Looks like a lot of maneuvering to get to where we are, I guess.
You want me to ask them to move one of the tables?
I feel like it would be nice if we could bring one in, right?
We could move.
Or just nobody sit way down there, I don't know.
Or just
Like move them
If we
out?
moved them out and we moved them down, then I would be
So like
more.
there's a-
serious.
Yeah, we might be able to do that without
Oh, yeah.
breaking anything.
Yeah.
Wanna move them to, oh, okay.
Move this in,
No,
no, out.
out, and then over.
There's enough slack in the water.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
That's not
Excuse
good.
me?
Is that what
Oh,
that is?
people are.
It's helping out with all that stuff. It's very excited about that.
Oh, I don't even know. Yeah. Just,
Something all that on.
I don't know. I'm having a long
Yeah.
So how's it impact, it popped in on?
It's very new.
It's gonna take a while.
Yeah, one thing I realized, I told them about, you know, the fact that we wanted to let people know and wondered if they're not trespass because I think it should be something that is thoughtful. We just, you know, the remaining issues are really tired. Maybe some research into what policies are really applicable, especially with this question. You know, it's kind of give them an intro.
I mean, there's no way to go around
them
it.
back
It's
in my
really
but I realized just
Alright.
in the memo without more, like it's kind of a, like reading chapter 3.
Yeah, yeah, no.
You know what I mean? I was like, oh, I gotta
So
give them
it's
back the
that.
materials too, and so
Well,
I
when
was,
they're ready, right? Then
and yeah, they're
ready,
totally
yeah.
not ready
Yeah.
for a substantive,
Yeah.
right? But, so it gives us a minute, but I
Yeah.
feel like it should be,
Yeah.
more than a minute, it should be, just, they need more than just that document clearly, so I
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure we all understood that we're clearly have to send them multiple documents and not just
Are we waiting for more people?
that, and I was
Yeah.
gonna check to see what we've written previously.
Yeah, we.
I know,
Okay,
let's-
like
let's-
we wrote
yeah.
something
Yeah, I have
in the
some
past,
of
and
those
so,
things. Yeah,
yeah.
I can send it to you. Yeah, this is what they need, really.
yeah.
Quorum is
Yeah,
typically
because they don't
And
understand
then-
the way it
And
works
then the
before,
fourth, I think there's-
right?
and
Nine.
then there's,
So it's 5. So we're
Okay,
fine
this
now.
is very helpful, so I'll look for these.
yeah.
Can I have these? You feel like you need these forever. You want them
I'll
all?
have to print
I can
them out.
search
You
for
can
them.
Search for them if you can't find them, take them.
Okay.
Okay.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
I have your other versions of anything you sent me, so I just archived.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah. I thought we'd wait a few more minutes to see.
Yeah, so who else,
We're waiting for Julie, Ali, and Pam, I think. I didn't hear.
no,
from Ali is.
oh, Ali, yeah,
Yeah.
right. So,
I think we took, oh, there's Pam.
hi Pam. Here you go. Thank you for having the agendas and
Yeah.
minutes, this is great. That doesn't usually happen. Thank you.
How are you today?
Good, thanks, and you?
Good.
That was fun.
Sure.
Hi.
Are you?
Good.
You guys have to think?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Jordan told me that she wasn't going to be able to make it tonight.
And I'm behind.
Mohammed's not coming, and Leslie's not coming, so we have all the commissioners we are expecting. We're just waiting on the council members now. We told them for you to wait a few more minutes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I ignored the email. I was like, there's no way I'm going downtown for anything any earlier than I have
HRC
to.
folder.
Alright.
Thank you. I need a date. 4:30.
Well, are you like considered a clerk deputized to kind of notarize it? No.
They just asked for the date and signature. You want to
Well,
take
it
it
says
to?
city clerks subscribed and sworn to me before. Are you gonna sign? No. You're like, no, I am not. Okay.
I'll turn it in.
I
They
will
just
date
asked for
it.
the
Okay,
date,
so
yeah.
maybe they will just backdate it in there. Okay. They will trust you when you say that. I signed it.
Okay.
And it was a
Thank you.
forgery.
FYI, it seems like the only unlocked restroom is the men's, so I use that one, but there's just for all the females in here or presenting as females, doesn't seem like there's any place down here to go to the bathroom. I don't know if anybody.
It is, it's always locked. There is one, but it's locked, and it's right outside
Yes,
this
so
door.
he
just
got
outside.
double booked with art commission
You have
tonight,
to ask
he'll be,
the-
so he's there from 7 to 8.
Very
He's gonna
strange.
come down.
But it's
Given
been,
that
we've been,
majority female.
we've been here, I've been here the last 5 years, and it's always been
It's
locked.
always been locked.
What is it?
Well,
With the
bathroom.
Women's room only. The men's room was open.
But there's stalls in there, so just
Okay.
use
I know, but it's just
Yeah.
weird.
There's
We were all
also-
women here except one.
There is the one on
The second floor, but it's inconvenient.
the, right upstairs, yeah. Well, the first floor.
You have to sit against
There's one on the first floor.
Yeah, but it's behind the locked doors, isn't it? I mean, when you go into the, like, the counter area.
No, it's before you go into the counter area. So if you
There
go
was
down,
something
you
that
go
said
up the
tapes
elevator
that I
and you just
thought
go
of.
around the corner,
Oh,
like where the water.
the water at
fountain
Sweet.
is.
Yeah.
Before when you
So
go in the
I
glass
get
doors.
these funds,
Usually the floor, the second floor ones are the
get
ones
like
that are unlocked.
Really?
bucket of water.
They lock
Kids
that
who
one
play,
too?
like dodgeball.
All right,
We've
I
only
think
been-
we're about ready to start.
Oh, okay.
I think I
So
listened.
we can check it out, but.
Okay.
And we've asked.
So welcome to the May meeting of the Ann Arbor Human Rights Commission. Let's start by introducing ourselves, beginning with Linda, am I right?
Hi, I'm Linda Winkler, Commissioner.
Corinne Moore, Commissioner.
Diana Cass, Commissioner.
Vivian Chang, Vice Chair and Commissioner, Acting Commissioner for this meeting, Acting Chair for this meeting.
Denise Janess, Management Assistant for the ICPOC and Human Rights Commission.
Dilip Das, Commissioner.
Pam Dent, Commissioner.
Julie Grand, City Council Liaison.
All right, and let's begin with public comments. So just wanted to note for everyone that there are two public comment, contrary to normal procedure. There are two times for public comment on this agenda, one in the beginning of the meeting, which will start now, and one at the end of the meeting to allow for, some comment in response to anything that might be shared today. So I'll call everyone who signed up for public comment and see if anyone's interested in speaking now or later, or when they would like to speak. The first name is Charmin.
Is this where I sit?
Mm.
Okay. I have handouts. Okay, good enough. Oh, thank you so much. Oh, here. And for people that aren't here, I guess, too. Okay, thanks. My name's Charmin Spicer. I've lived in Ann Arbor and the surrounding area for more than 40 years. I raised a family in Ann Arbor, sent my son to Ann Arbor Public Schools. I've worked at the University of Michigan and for Ann Arbor Public Schools. And I'm here tonight for a couple of reasons. I was involved with supporting the Oversight Police Task Force, and for the last 10 years, I've really seen a great need in Ann Arbor and worked towards all of the population being represented, not just the privileged people who have access to being able to be represented and to being able to be heard. So because of that commitment, then I followed through with that by supporting the development of the Police Oversight Commission. And that is really a critical entity to me if Ann Arbor's going to be a city that works to protect the human and civil rights of all of its people. And that doesn't include just residents, because there's a lot of people, hundreds, that come to Ann Arbor every day to work and to go to school. So I just think it's really important to have people speak up for the people whose voices can't be heard. So I came tonight to the Human Rights Commission, which I've never been here before. So I'm excited to be here. And I wanted to thank the new and returning members of the commission who are here for your service. I really appreciate it. I think you're the most important body in city government. And I also wanted to thank the city council liaisons, and I know Ali isn't here, but I have some requests as you go into this kind of transition. And what I consider to be the transition is, I know you're going to be, you've lost Dwight as a commissioner, and you're also gaining a body in the Police Oversight Task Force that you will have a critical role in supporting and advocating and helping those folks understand what's the city all about, because it is a difficult and complex entity. So I passed out some touchstone quotes that I'm big on getting support from other sources, especially when I'm in a situation where I face challenges. And I think that you probably already know, but you do face challenges, and you will. And so my request to you in your roles as protecting the human rights of people, and I looked up what are considered human rights, and it said shared values. The rights are based on shared values like dignity, fairness, equality, respect, and independence. And so I'm going to just ask each of us to recognize that what feels like respect to one person might be different than another person, and that in the positions you're all in, when you feel like someone isn't having respect and when you feel uncomfortable, to stick with that and not let it interfere with your ability to listen. Because I think the biggest role that you have is to listen. I know for 5 years I handled sexual harassment complaints at University of Michigan. And in the first few months I realized I really wasn't going to be able to do much about the complaints. But my biggest role and responsibility was when people feel heard, it made so much difference. It didn't necessarily help them in the situation, but they felt heard and they felt valued and respected. So I just implore you in your roles to listen so that you can understand what the work is that needs to be done. And I also implore you to resist the pressure to problem solve or to go along with necessarily what the city wants, to really try to think about what do the humans need who aren't typically represented on city council. And as the city council liaisons, I really wish Ali was here because it's most important for you to support the Human Rights Commission and the Police Oversight Commission, because you're the dam, to keep the water from just overcoming everything. The only other thing is I'm really concerned, and you'll hear some other people talk about you're losing your history, people who know the history of the Human Rights Commission, like Dwight. And so to please try to hang on to people who have the experience and who've been working with the commission in their capacities, because I know that all the people appointed to the police oversight, there weren't a lot of people carried over from the task force. And that was such a unique and powerful group. And the way they came together and heard each other out with such divergent views and feelings, it was really a magnificent accomplishment in my eyes, and I was at almost every meeting. And I hope that doesn't get lost by people being new and reinventing the wheel and what the task force already went through. So that wasn't really clear. I'm sorry I didn't prepare, but I really appreciate being able to share those things with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane.
Next up on the list that said that they wish to give public comment is Lori.
Wow, Sherman, good job. I wish that I came to more of your meetings, because I do believe how important your work is. And I concur with Sharman that this new commission, the Oversight Commission, which is birthed by you, basically, is going to need you to be paying attention to what they're doing. And they're a fledgling group, and you've got a lot of collective years of experience under your belts, although some of you are new. But that really helps and that matters. And I say that because my name's Lori Saginaw, and I signed up to do a job that I knew nothing about, except that I was very committed to it. I was privileged to be the co-chair of the task force that helped to create the ordinance that formed the ICPOC. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. And when I talk about having to learn it on the fly, I was on my toes and on my heels, never flat, one day of those 6 months. It's a good thing I didn't have a full-time job or any children at home, because it would all have been neglected. And we had the extra burden of a very difficult timeline to meet, so that added to the intensity of the work. But it gave me an appreciation for what a public servant is, to appreciate commissioners in a way that I never even imagined. And I say this because if I were, as hard as it was, if I were asked to do it again, I would gladly do it, and I would do it better. And I think that experience is so important in this job, which is essentially entrusting every single one of you to be the best possible thinker and listener and understander that you can. And you do it collectively, and you do it individually. So it's from that place of the experience of having been on the task force that I want to go on record as saying how important I think it is when people show a desire to be on a commission, when they understand what it takes to be on a commission, and that desire and that experience can improve the commission and improve the individuals who serve on it. And I think that experience, if I were in a position to rate what counts the most, would be at the top. I would also like to share that I am frustrated with not understanding the criteria that are used in making appointments and the criteria that are used in not making an appointment. And I feel that because you are a product of City Council, that you are an extension of the community, an extension of the community's trust, but I would like to know more in order to be able to trust in that process. So I don't feel that I have access to that information. I don't think I'm alone in that. And I mean, you're the commission that I'm most invested in besides the ICPOC. But I think that that criteria by which we judge ourselves, we judge one another, and we're judged by the community is important to be known. I know that 3 seats have terms that are expiring. I know that all 3 commissioners have an interest in continuing to serve. And I would hope that that desire and that experience will allow council to be able to vote on all of those applications. Did I miss anything? I think that there are behaviors that constitute negligence, irresponsibility, danger to the public, just an incapacity to do the work. And I think that those are reasons that an individual might be asked to not continue to serve. But aside from that, I think commissions are strong if they are as diverse as they can be, so that people on them do not have the same points of view, do not have the same skill sets, do not have the same experiences, and that together the decisions that you make that impact individual lives and guide our community to go in the direction it needs to go, then it happens. If we are homogeneous as bodies on commissions, it doesn't work. And if we don't have a critical mass of experience with which to reflect on the past and, support new commissioners, then I think it doesn't work. I think Dwight's stepping down, and I understand that his father-in-law died. It gave him a sense of his priorities. He's worked very, very hard. I applaud his self-care, but it leaves a huge void. So I don't want you to be absent of the strength that you need as a body. Thank you.
Thank you. The last on the list for public comment is Shirley.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Most of you know me and some of you don't, so I'll introduce myself. I'm Shirley Beckley, and I've been a resident, born and raised here for over 70 years. and worked very hard with this commission, and we worked together, I thought, very well, and very hard at the task force meetings, and very hard at setting up the Police Oversight Commission. I call it police, I don't call it community police oversight, because I don't know yet if it represents the community. Because a lot of the 62 people that applied were a lot of the community that didn't get picked, so I don't know what happened there. So that's a little disturbing, but we'll see what we got and see what we're going to work with. But tonight, one of the things I want to talk about is the fact that we that work so hard in this community to get you to understand how important it was to have the Police Oversight Commission, that we didn't know you had a meeting. So how are we to know that? And what do you plan to do to let us know? Is one of my questions. Do we go up on your website? I know that the Police Oversight Commission has met once, so they got to get their website together. But while they're getting themselves together, it just felt like like we weren't, I'm going to speak for me. It felt like it was like we weren't invited to come. We weren't wanted to be there. And I don't think that's something that you want to give to the community, that as hard as a lot of us have worked, that we're not going to know when you're going to meet and when you're not going to, so that we can continue to be a part. Because as Lori said in what she talked about, I think it's very important that this Police Oversight Commission have the history of how they got there, what went on for them to get there, because when you had your task force, only a few people knew why they were there. They didn't know the history, and it's very important to know the history. This is something that we've asked for back in 1970, not just 4 years ago. But we asked for this Police Oversight Commission back in 1970, and we weren't heard, or it wasn't set up. And then we had to do a lot of peaceful fighting to get it recognized in the past 4 years. So I'm concerned about that and want to know. I just found out tonight that you have a person hired, which I didn't know that. So I think it's important that you let us know, those of us that you know that have worked so hard, that we have somewhere to go to know. And she said it was posted. I don't remember your name.
Oh, Denise.
Denise.
Yes.
She said it was posted maybe upstairs, but was it posted on your website?
You're talking
For
about
the
ICPOC
ICPOC?
meeting?
Mm-hmm.
I know the ICPOC agenda and the notice was posted. I pitched it out publicly last Thursday
But
before
posted
the
where?
meeting. I know it was down here in the lobbies, and I know it was on the monitor. I can't say if it was on the HRC site or not.
Okay. So that's one
That's
of
a
the
good
things.
idea
But
to add.
that would
I
have
think-
to,
That's very-
I don't mind putting it on the HRC
Yeah.
site.
It's a good idea.
Well, I'm asking you all, would you do that, so that that's where I go to get the
Okay.
information. And because you all were so active,
Mhm.
that's why I thought that's where that information would be.
Yeah.
So I would like to ask that if you all would consider putting it on your website until they get their website up, so we have somewhere directly to go,
Yep.
so that we know what's going on. And then we don't feel like we're being left out. Because as a community, it's very important for us to be there.
Yeah.
We've been in this a long time, so that's why I'm concerned. And I think the Human Rights Commission is a place, even though you're an arm of the city, but you're the arm of the city that is here to protect the civil rights of your community and your citizens. So, and I, of course, have been to several of your meetings, so I want to come tonight and voice that concern. And to know that, you know, what's going on with the police oversight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do see that on our website there is a section that's called Independent Community Police Oversight Commission, and it seems like it's a list of basic info and just the names of the current commissioners. It seems like it would be really easy to maybe put a link in there.
Yes, I could put a link in
to
there
the
for us.
schedule or
So
something.
the schedule has been approved for the year at the ICPOC orientation meeting for the rest of the year, so I can put that link on the HRC site.
Yeah, I think that'd be really helpful.
Okay.
And when there is a new webpage for them, that could be added to
Right.
on our site.
We met
Yeah.
yesterday
Yeah.
about creating the webpage.
Right. Just until they get themselves organized to do
Okay.
that, so that, you know, we'll know to go directly to them.
Yeah.
Then I won't have to browbeat everybody and ask, how come we didn't know, and when did you meet? And
That's really good idea.
because, you know, at this point, we really have to try to understand and work together so this works harmoniously.
Thank
So
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
I think that concludes public comment for now. Moving on to approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any comments about the agenda? Anything they wanted to add or change? All right. Could someone move to adopt the agenda as is?
I move to adopt the agenda.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
And the agenda is accepted. Moving on to April minutes. Any changes? Any discussion?
I had some changes. So let's see. Was it section 4A where we talked about introduction of so I guess section 4 where we discussed the trespass. I think she's used the term quote-unquote trespassing concerns, and I thought that would better be replaced with concerns regarding trespass policy. I don't know. It just reads weird when it's trespassing concerns.
Okay.
So that's one. Section 5A, where we talk about source of income. I thought a better title for that would be Amendment to Source of Income Provision of Non-Discrimination Ordinance. I actually typed these out so I can actually email them to you so you don't have to write down word for word. If people agree with me, right? So I thought a better title for that is Amendment to Source of Income Provision of Non-Discrimination Ordinance, right? And instead of the description that was provided, I thought it would be more accurate to state Commissioner Moore discussed memo from herself and Washtenaw Housing Alliance member Libby Benton that proposes amending the source of income provision of the Human Rights Ordinance or the Non-Discrimination Ordinance. Okay. The goal would be to expand the definition of source of income to protect individuals utilizing housing subsidies against discrimination by landlords. The memo was also forwarded to Margaret Radabaugh of the City Attorney's Office for further review. I don't know who forwarded it to the City Attorney. I think maybe Leslie did, right?
I think so.
Okay. But yeah, I didn't. Okay. I feel like it gave me way more credit than I deserved there. Okay. So that's my proposed change for that section. And then section 5B, where we talked about the conversion therapy ordinance. I thought a better title would be, and if someone else has a better title, let me know, but proposal to introduce an ordinance prohibiting conversion therapy, and even recommend introduction of, because we don't really actually pass any laws here. We just sort of recommend things, and our liaisons can choose to run with them, or any city council member can choose to run with that. So maybe it's better listed as a recommendation, right? And then for the description, because I know it was, if you were just walking in the room and you had no idea what we were talking about, so I decided that it should say, Commissioner Moore discussed the memo forwarded from the mayor and written by University of Michigan law student in support of having Ann Arbor adopt an ordinance that prohibited conversion therapy. Moore indicated that there would likely be concerns regarding how such an ordinance would impact freedom of religion and freedom of speech. Commissioners also discussed reviewing sample ordinances from localities in neighboring states, such as Ohio. Moore agreed to provide information to supplement these concerns. The memo has also been forwarded to the city attorney's office for further review. So I thought that would be more accurate if people agree. You had some edits?
Well, I had similar edits. Yours are much better than mine, so.
Okay.
And then I just had a few little things. Let's see, 3C, just instead of the last line, the annual report will be discussed at the May HRC meeting with revisions. How about the revised annual report will be discussed at the May HRC meeting?
Okay.
I can send it to you if you want.
Okay.
And then on the Trespass Revisited, I just thought maybe it would be good to be a little more specific, so I just changed it to the HRC will forward their comments on the current trespass notice and trespassing policy and procedural order to the city attorney and the police chief for review. Because it was, it was both the notice and the order, so I thought maybe by naming them might be a little better.
Okay.
And I think, yeah, I mean the others are just little, nothing, so that's it.
There's a typo, I think, at the end on
Yeah.
adjourn.
Yeah,
Needs
I
a
just
ED
didn't,
adjourn.
little
In the very last.
At the meeting,
Yeah.
be adjourned, I guess, really,
Okay,
it should
yes.
say. Right. And the other one I had was under public comment, but it's so little. Libby Hunter wanted to discuss a book review. I would say Libby Hunter discussed a book review. But
Say that again?
I can send them to you. It just
Okay.
under public comments, Libby Hunter, I would say discussed a book review instead of wanted to.
Okay.
But I'm happy, if everybody agrees, I'm happy just to send you those two things that you
Okay.
have.
Yes, I can make those changes tomorrow.
Does anyone have any more changes to suggest? Motion to accept the minutes as amended?
I'll move to accept the minutes as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Alright, thank you, and the minutes will be accepted as amended. The first thing on the agenda is trespass and ICPOC update. So I know that between the last meeting and this one, we all worked on getting our comments, our substantive comments and concerns about the trespass policy put together into, a memo that Denise helped us compile. And I think the last we heard of it had been forwarded to relevant city staff. And have we received any responses to that? Has anyone said anything?
There's one question. I think maybe we weren't clear about exactly who we wanted to send it to, and I think it got sent to Ariane and Margaret,
Yes.
but not to
the-
Police Chief Fairness or maybe Jason Forsman. I think maybe it should go to them also, since
Yeah.
the memo is addressed on its face to APD and the City Attorney's Office, so
Yeah,
if everybody's okay with that.
I tend to think that the city attorneys would know to forward it along, but it wouldn't hurt to send it to them again as well.
Since the chief is retiring very soon, I might just send it to DC Forsberg at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Just we don't know who's taking over
Right.
and then on an interim
When is he?
basis. Just a couple weeks.
Oh, it's that soon.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think before the end of the month, I
Can you
believe.
speak up a little bit?
Sure.
We can't
Yeah,
hear you.
sorry.
Okay, sure, sorry.
Just a quick comment, and we discussed this somewhat at length in our last meeting. Because of the time that we have expended in this endeavor, I think we should add in forwarding the information that we would like a response, since you have not received a response, no later than the end of this month, and certainly prior to our next meeting, so that ideally we have some final disposition relative to this. I think we're going into our 19th month now, and I really don't want to see this drag on any further than we necessarily have to, unless they have some substantive, definitive objections or pushback as it relates to the suggestions and recommendations that we have communicated in writing to them. So I'd like to have the record reflect that we'd like to have that information on or before, but not later than our next meeting.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that one of the benefits I think we talked about having Denise here is that there was someone who could regularly communicate with the police and ask why we haven't gotten any responses back. And I think it's still really important for us to see the former trespass policy too. I know that we focused a lot in this memo on what we would still like to see change with the current trespass policy. But that doesn't change, I think, some of our concerns with how trespass used to be implemented and what sort of guidance the police used to give officers. And so if you could continue to forward things along and let us know if anyone responds, and if they don't, if you could continue to check back in with them and let them know that we are eagerly anticipating any sort of response, that would be very,
I can check weekly and still ask for a turnaround time by June's meeting.
That'd be great.
If not before. I tend to work from a date certain deadline, so it's kind of up in the air and vague and ambiguous for me to, even though I've said by the next meeting.
Yes.
But I personally don't understand why we're still waiting. Maybe it's just me. But for something that exists or we're told exists, I don't understand why we can't get access to that information. So I don't know whom it is that you would need to direct that request to. I probably would direct it to Margaret Radevise, the city attorney, and also Jason Forsberg as the deputy chief, and anyone else that you may deem appropriate who can at least provide the information. I'm hard pressed to understand why it is so difficult to get access to a document that exists. That is, I don't see where we would need to FOIA that. I can't imagine that we would have to.
I would think so.
But I also think that it's public knowledge, so I don't understand the delay in
You're
getting.
talking about the prior policy?
That's what I was going to
Yes.
ask, the current policy, the
No, no, no.
current
The prior policy.
I'm talking about the prior policy.
prior trespass policy.
Yeah, we saw at our last meeting what they introduced as the existing policy, at least what they were proposed would be the existing policy. But
Okay.
we've been waiting some time for the prior policy that we have yet to receive.
And no one has received an email, so I can check and
No.
see if they can be emailed to.
They haven't, I'm sure.
No.
I think they don't realize that we're waiting for it at this point.
I don't know how many times we have to say it.
I think, I don't know, I'm not sure, but I think they think that by turning over the policy that they
Right.
did, they have met our request. I'm not sure that they even know that we want the prior policy too.
But we've communicated
So
that
really, we're
very-
waiting for both the prior policy and a
And the-
response to the memo that
Right.
was just sent on April 23rd. It hasn't
Okay,
been
yes,
that
April
long.
23rd.
Right.
So that really hasn't been very long, yeah.
And if you can ask if we need to FOIA it, we can FOIA it, but we need to know that we need to FOIA it.
Yeah.
And
The
just-
other thing that I would communicate is that we have a liaison here. So I'm gonna ask you, I'm putting you on the spot, Julie, if you would not intervene on our behalf and request that information as well.
So if you could CC me on whatever
Sure.
emails, myself and Ollie, that's really
And Ollie,
helpful in
okay.
terms of helping me keep on top of things.
Yeah, I can do
Thank
that.
you. That's great.
Do you all have microphones?
No.
Yeah, they're on the,
I don't think
No,
you
not
can't
for-
for
not
microphones,
not-
they're just for,
They're
yeah.
They're recording us,
Yeah.
but let's try to
Project
project
more.
more
Okay.
here.
No, our apologies.
Okay.
Yeah. So just for your notes, I think in case this is helpful too, the policy number was AAPD policy 041-026. So that was
041026.
041-026.
Okay.
That was the
AAPD.
number of the old trespassing
Also the new
guideline.
one.
And also the new one, so
Yeah.
if we have to specifically ask for something, that's what we should be asking for.
But we want,
The old
the old
one too,
version
yeah.
of the same number.
Okay.
So I just wanted to add that I did bring up the fact that the HRC plans to bring ICPOC into this conversation at our first meeting last week. And I didn't forward our memo to them at that time. It was the first time we'd met. I let them know it was coming. I also realized that they needed a little bit more background information to supplement that memo. And I spoke to Linda earlier. And so we're going to also send, just so they have an idea of what our memo is actually addressing,
the document that says Trespass, what the Ann Arbor Human Rights Commission has learned so far, where Leslie summarized, what we learned after all of our interactions, with the chief and the city attorney's office, and also proposed changes to the trespass process, because that's where we gave them proposed changes and that's how they responded. Obviously, they failed to actually provide the original policy to us, but just so they have some background with that memo, otherwise they're coming in without having an idea of what we requested in the first place. And so particularly, I think the issue of what guidance are they giving with regard to discretion is something that's actually going to take a little bit more time and a little bit more thought, because I think that's something that police nationally are working on, because we obviously have an ongoing problem with police and trespass and how it's enforced and whether it's being enforced in a discriminatory manner. And I think right now police are trying to figure out how to change their policies, and we need to be a part of that conversation nationally so that we actually are recommending the best policies and not just sort of, tell your officers to do this or that. I think that whatever their current guidance is probably not the best guidance. And, so I just think that particular issue is one that's going to take more thought and research and discussion than some of the other edits that we proposed.
Sure, but if the answer is that they currently don't have any guidance,
that is important. So yes,
we
need to know.
If there's nothing.
Yes, as far as ICPOC is concerned, that's sort of the area where I'm hoping they can actually further develop that conversation beyond what we've gotten, and I think we should continue to push, obviously, but that's one that I expect to take more time. Particularly, I know we hope to have a response, at the next meeting, and at least that'll give us the baseline. But I just want us to, that to be a conversation starter and not a conversation ender.
I think that's a rather good transition to the ICPOC update. So I know the ICPOC had its first meeting on April 30th.
Yes.
Green, as liaison to both, essentially. How did that go?
It went well. So it was the first time that the 11 of us had been in a room together, and so there was a lot of time spent just on introductions, and certainly just listening to each other and finding out each other's background. And we learned that I guess Ali will be replacing Zach as one of the liaisons to the commission. We had introductions from relevant city employees and a summary on regulations and Open Meetings Act, and things of that sort. We elected a temporary chair. Robin Stevens is the temporary chair, while we sort of get to know each other a little bit. And I think at the next meeting, people who actually want to engage the position of chair and, allow people to make an informed vote will be advising that they plan to run for chair, and then we'll elect a chair, I think, by the next meeting after that. So procedurally, we were just kind of, getting an idea of who each other is and, who's going to run it and what responsibilities were involved. Leslie was there to talk about how much time it actually takes to prep for meetings and, what the work of the chair involved. And it looks like we have at least 5 people who have had experience running meetings, and hopefully one of those individuals will step up and want to take on that role. Like I said, I was the only one who sort of introduced a substantive issue, and I gave them some insight about the fact that we have this ongoing conversation about improving trespass policy, and that we will be forwarding a memo with additional information. And so that was really the only substantive thing that was discussed. And there were public comments taken. Denise was there, obviously. Thank you. And it wasn't great turnout. And I think that we heard today that a lot of people weren't aware that the meeting was posted. It was probably shorter notice than usual. I'm sure it was the standard legal notice, but probably shorter notice than I think a lot of community members are expecting to see. So certainly the community that we expect to see at these meetings was not there. And so I hope that they are there in upcoming meetings. Looks like we have a special meeting, and I told some of you about this, scheduled next week. We have the date and time again, Denise?
It is May 14th From 5 to 7
And
here,
yep,
Downstairs here?
correct.
in this room, and it's a special meeting called to discuss the recent resignation of the employee, the HR employee with the city of Ann Arbor, who, you know, obviously had a lot of problematic things to say via text message, right? And it may or may not be also how that may have already impacted the police chief search. I think they want to talk about that. It does look like some commissioners can't make it. That meeting is already posted and it is going to happen, and so hopefully there will be people there to discuss that. It's a public meeting, please join us. And our next actual formal ICPOC meeting
May
is
28th.
the 28th.
Tuesday, May 28th,
Right.
in the council chambers,
And that's at 5 p.m.
5 to 7, yes.
Are you saying 5?
5 until 7 p.m.
So nobody works? They take off from work to get here and stuff? 5 o'clock?
I do, and you know, and that's unfortunate. I am going to bring up at the next meeting whether that's an inconvenience for everyone else, because it is definitely an inconvenience for me. I think it had to do with availability of the meeting room, and I don't know what our other options are, but if other commissioners are willing to explore other time slots, that is something I'm going to bring up. So that's my update on ICPOC. Does anyone have any questions?
No questions, but just a comment, I was able to see it twice
Oh.
on cable.
Oh,
And
wow.
very productive meeting. I was pleased to see just the way that it was presented with the introductions, because while many of us on this commission reviewed all of the candidates for the commission itself, I had anyway, papers. I didn't know face-wise the individuals. So it was nice to put names with faces with the viewing of the actual meeting. And I agree that perhaps if there's a way, I think I heard it discussed that you all have somewhat of a calendar, like you're gonna meet regularly, monthly.
Right.
So maybe if that can be published, then the public will know, to speak to your concern, Shirley, that I didn't remember, even though I was told when you would meet. So I was grateful that I was able to see it subsequently. And it looks like there's a lot of work that we know will go into the overall success. But I'm pleased to see with the caliber of expertise and all that each of the individuals who are on that commission now bring to the table. It's going to be an interesting commission, not only because of the diversity of the individuals, but because of the nature of the work that you will be engaged in. And I think that dovetails nicely with what we as the HRC has done and will continue to do. So congratulations to those of you who are on it, i.e. Kareen, and the work that I know will be interesting, if not productive, and ultimately beneficial to our city. So I'm looking forward to that.
I was there also because, I'm putting in the audience for other than 2 minutes to introduce myself. So all of those who were involved in the nomination process were invited to come to the first meeting, which I know getting 11 schedules and City Hall together for the first time can be pretty challenging, which I think there was some uncertainty up until probably a week before that was going to be the actual date, and now it should be on the city calendar at this point. So I do apologize for that. I think we were uncertain up until the end whether or not whether it was going to be go for that date or not. So but I was incredibly impressed with the group and the warmth of the members towards one another right away, and the dedication and the willingness to really share where they were coming from and why they cared so much about the work that they're set to do. So if you can see it was videotaped, and if you didn't have a chance to see it, just the introductions, I wouldn't, the rest of it, Open Meetings Act, et cetera, you don't need to watch, but just to get to know the commissioners, it made me very appreciative of this group's contributions to the selection process, to the integrity of the selection process overall, to the quality of candidates we had to begin with. I thought it was a pretty solid start, but it was quiet in there for sure. And we will be. I know there is that special meeting. I'm on the council administration committee, and we've got that 4 o'clock slot right before the 5 o'clock slot. I'm sure to discuss something similar. So, if anyone has any questions, I don't know if that's on the agenda anywhere today.
The HR update that is under new business.
Okay, all right. So I've received some email communications, and Ollie has as well. So when we get to that, I'm happy to answer questions with the information that I know so far.
So if no one has any more questions about the ICPOC update for now. I think this also rolls really well into our next item, which is the police chief update, because I know that we have now seen the 3 finalists, the 3 candidates for police chief. They've been announced publicly, I believe. And for anyone who doesn't know, they're Michael Cox, who has served with the Boston Police Department and is currently the bureau chief of the Bureau of Professional Development at the Boston Police Academy. Brian Gerald, who has served as police chief in Prescott Valley, Arizona, since 2013. And also Jason Forsberg, who has served as the department deputy chief for a little over a year now. And I know that I received a timeline of events, and it seemed that one of the reasons the task force was really pressed to sort of come up with this ordinance and get an ICPOC seated was because the city really wanted ICPOC to be involved in the police chief search, right? And so the ICPOC is finally seated at the very end of this police chief search. And it seemed to me from an email that we received that the finalists will be meeting with ICPOC members on May 17th. Is that going to be a meeting of ICPOC with these 3 finalists?
Do you want me to explain the interview process, because it's really confusing, and maybe Denise can help me. Someone had to explain it to me. So there are 3 candidates. The morning of the 17th, there are 3 time slots. So there's a 9 o'clock, a 10 o'clock, and an 11 o'clock interview slot. The candidates will rotate to 3 groups. So city council will interview the candidates, asking the same questions one at a time. That will be televised. ICPOC is another one of those groups. We'll also interview the candidates individually, rotating. And the 3rd rotation is a group of community members, I believe. Is that right?
I'm not clear on the 3rd group as much as I am the city council and the ICPOC.
Yeah, I understand, because there was the conversation at ICPOC that there were not enough spots for ICPOC, but someone could move to the community member slot. So I believe that's the other.
So Leslie, was supposed to interview as I think as a community rep, and I was gonna sit in for her because she most likely can't make that time slot, and so ICPOC was going to do 5 on one day and 5 on another day.
On
11 of
the
us.
panel, so there's no quorum.
Okay, so that was the only goal, was that only 5 of us could appear at a time to avoid quorum.
So maybe it's 2.
Is it 2 different days?
It was 2. I thought Thursday and Friday were 2 options. Weren't we coming on 2 different days?
The option that was mentioned at the meeting was just the 17th. Friday the 17th. You were going on the 16th.
I am scheduled to attend.
The community member interview is happening on the 16th, and the ICPOC interview is happening on the 17th.
So at the ICPOC meeting, they just, Howard Laz would stress the 17th, 8:15 until 2.
Oh, so
and to stay the entire.
2 ICPOCs then. 2 ICPOC groups and 1 city council group, and they're rotating. I know it's a rotation, and I know that that councils is televised.
There was
and
definitely
we
two
inter-
ICPOC
yeah,
groups,
okay, then there's
so
two,
that
okay, so
Tim
that's what it
could
is.
go, and we
ICPOC
were saying that one wouldn't be able to go, and I
A
said that I
ICPOC
could.
B council, and they rotate so that each group is interviewing them one at a time. They interview all 3 candidates. Thank you. I said it was confusing, and that's how we're working it.
If all 11
No.
ICPOC members could come, then one would have to go the day before because we can only have
Right.
5 per panel.
Right. And
okay.
so I advised that since I was probably sitting in for Leslie.
Yes.
Leslie is coming back, so she
Yeah,
probably
Leslie
be
will
able-
want to do it, which is fine.
Yeah.
Because we'll still have 10 ICPOC people, right? So right. So, but only 10 of the 11 ICPOC.
So I think I heard you say that the council members are all going to be asking the same questions for each of the 3 candidates. Like, has ICPOC gotten time to meet to come up with their own questions? Or?
Usually, those questions are standardized,
Yeah.
and I know we were not consulted on what those questions would be.
So
I don't
you'll
think
be-
Leslie was consulted.
I think we
You'll
are
be
allowed
given
to.
questions to ask to them?
We
Like,
are,
as-
but we can ask
We can
follow
follow
up.
up.
Okay.
We can ask follow up.
So I know that, is the emergency meeting that ICPOC is having, is that only solely dedicated to the HR update? Like, there were...
The HR update, yes, and how that may have impacted
Okay.
general, issues, including, right, the police chief search.
Will 10 members of ICPOC be able to attend this 3-hour morning meeting?
I don't know, because we
haven't.
would have needed to communicate to Denise individually,
Right.
whether we want it or we're available to attend.
Yes.
So I don't know how many have communicated to you so far.
6
So far 6
Yes.
of the 11.
6 can,
can,
or 6?
6 can attend the interview panel.
Does that mean 11 have gotten back to you and only 6 can?
No,
or
those,
just 6?
the 6 have asked, could they be put on the panel?
So 6 so far.
So 6 so far.
How were community members selected for the interview panel that's happening on
I do
Thursday?
not know.
Do you know how many community members are?
I don't know. I don't know. In the past, I sat in on the deputy chief interviews, and let me see, it was about 6 to 8 community members. And again, we were given the questions, and we couldn't take the questions with us, and it was confidential. We could ask follow-up, right? So we could kind of have a conversation. But I don't know how they were chosen then, and I don't know how they were chosen now.
Who chose?
We don't know. We don't know. No one here knows, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it was.
Which is part of why we want to know, well, was HR involved in, choosing the community members? And I think hopefully Lazarus will be able to provide an update on that, because I think those are the questions that are being asked right now.
Does every group ask the same questions? Like, are the questions that the community members and council members asking the same as the ones that the ICPOC are asking?
I don't know.
My guess would be yes, because I think they're trying to standardize it as much as possible. I know in the phone interviews, they had to ask the same questions because they want to try to, eliminate as much bias as possible in the interview process.
But if 7 different groups are all asking the same questions to everyone, and are they giving different answers? Like,
That's a good
time
question.
2, 3, 4, 5, or what is the point of 7 different groups doing?
I don't
this if
know.
they can go
I'm-
outside?
I know for sure that there was a lot of scoring involved, and I may or may not be Lazarus's decision to do it this way, and he tried to explain that, I don't know, from his background, that this was the best way to do it, and if we all scored, then you could get a more accurate score as to whether someone was more qualified than someone else. So I think that Lazarus needs to explain, how that works and why. But I wasn't told what this interview process, would look like in detail. It sounds like she knows more than I do. Or, okay.
I mean, to be totally honest, it's sometimes as I get closer, I pay closer attention to what the what the requirements of the day are. Yeah, it's. I mean, it was brought up. The whole just figuring out how I was going to take a half a day off from work and get back for my office hours was a challenge. So, and I, my concerns have been more recently about the concerns about, HR's involvement. So that's honestly what I've been keeping my eye on more than the questions that we'll be asking more than a week from now. Yeah.
So I want to interject here now because this topic is what we discussed last month. And I know that because I brought it up. And I was very specific in asking those questions by asking, are the questions standardized? Have they been validated? I speak with some degree of expertise because I've done it for 20 years in HR and civil rights. I know that your local civil rights agencies have guidelines for questions that can be asked in an interview process for employment purposes. So when I posed the question last month asking would all candidates be asked the same question? And could we not get access to those questions? Here we sit a month later at the exact same place that we're now discussing the exact same thing. So it's a little disturbing to me that we tend to, I see, at least in this particular endeavor, a somewhat, I don't want to criticize anyone, but I want to be very clear in saying that things that I believe are important, certainly to me and I believe the community as well, tend to fall on deaf ears because questions are asked and we get no answers. Or we get, I don't know. And I'm not criticizing anyone, I'm not blaming anyone. But I recall with clarity, and it can certainly be verified with the tape recording of our meetings, that I asked specifically, could we not have access to those questions so that we would know what would be asked of the applicants? And if those same questions had been validated, and there are agencies and organizations that are in business to do just that, and I don't know that our city has even accessed that information, or what, if anything, has been done in reference to the questions that will be asked of the candidates, and if they've been validated. There's a very good reason why EEOC and in this state MDCR exist. It's because we don't do things right, or we do them where it causes harm to certain groups of individuals. And I'm not saying that this is the case in this instance. I'm just saying that history and law supports me when I say that when we don't do things in a timely, open, transparent manner, then we have all of this other. We have the I don't knows, and we have the we don't know. So I'd like for this commission to take the lead in addressing specifics with timeliness, questions that are posed, and getting very clear answers to those questions. So I'm going to reiterate my request, and that is, can we get access to those questions that will be posed of those candidates? I think we as a community deserve that. Not so much that, I'm being forceful and being, I can't think of another adjective to describe myself, but at any rate, I simply am just reiterating what I said. I'd like to see a copy of the questions that will be asked of the candidates. I'd like to know that those same questions have been validated. The other thing that disturbs me, especially being in HR for the years that I have been, is the manner in which, not that I'm questioning it, but I just think it speaks to the transparency of this entire endeavor. We are given 3 names out of, I forgot now how many they said actually applied. So while in every instance where this commission has been involved in evaluating individuals for anything, we have publicized the entire listing of candidates or applicants who applied. I fail to see why we do not, as the public, get access to that same information for this position. Why are we only given the finalists, and how was that determination made? I understand that the city contracted with a search firm to identify candidates for the police chief position. But I think it's equally important that we see all candidates who expressed interest in this. I'm a little uncomfortable with this whole process, and I'm just going on record saying that.
One thing, I'm not sure to what extent it was our not following through by asking somebody in the city these questions that you raised last time. Mr. Lazarus has made it very clear to Leslie that he watches all of our meetings after the fact, and that there are times when he's watching us that he wishes if we had questions, we would just ask him. So my suggestion is, if you want to, send an email with your great questions to Mr. Lazarus, especially given what's going on in HR right now.
All of these meetings and hears us voice questions.
Right.
Well,
Yes,
he's
you
not,
could- you
he's
could
not
say
actually
that.
the one who's in charge of it right now. John Fournier is, and I just sent him that email.
Okay, which email?
The email saying HRC would like to, can HRC see
Okay.
the questions and were they validated?
Okay, and yes, and then the larger questions about the process.
Yeah.
And how it was narrowed down.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about publishing all of the names, I think that's
Yeah.
pretty standard for searches that you do not, for reasons of privacy,
Right,
unless
do
you're
that.
selected
That's
as one of the finalists.
That's
And personally, I can say I'm very supportive of that. I don't think that when people are in jobs and they're applying, that you know, I think we respect their privacy in terms of interests in jobs. And, you know, if you're one of the 3 finalists and you're coming in for an interview, then that's public, but before that, it's not. And I'm sure that the search firm would adhere to those principles as well. You know, it's the same reason I didn't want names released of
Yeah.
people who weren't
No, makes
selected.
sense.
It's
Makes sense, yeah.
but, you know, that's,
Do we have enough people to sort of form a subcommittee so that we're not waiting another month for answers to those questions, especially since a lot of things are happening next week? We might want to actually try to get a meeting with Lazarus and get those questions answered in person, because I think that, you know, or Fournier, whatever, because I think that there's a lot that needs to be said, you know. And since you have HR experience, you know, I would like for you to be one of those people, you know,
Happy to do it.
who would be able to meet with Lazarus and get more information. My schedule's really bad. I'm happy to join you if I can make it, right? But my next week is insane for me, but I'm happy to join you if I can be there. Does anyone else want to try to join a meeting?
Sure, I can. I think Leslie will be back. She might want to instead.
Yeah, because scheduling, like,
Yeah, and if a meeting ends up happening, I would be really interested to know who selected which community members were in the community member group, like what criteria was used to decide who was put in the community member group, and also maybe like how much weight each group gets, because it seems like there's 6 to 7 different groups that are interviewing and perhaps scoring. There's like law enforcement and legal, police department, union presidents. Like, are they given more or less weight, the community members, and why, if so?
Yeah.
I just think it's really weird that like no one knows who's on the community member panel, or like who was tapped, or who even put together that panel. I think it's probably also important to note that on May 15th, there will be a public meet and greet in the Justice Center lobby from 5:30 to 7:30, so that members of the community can meet the finalists and ask them their own questions. And I think, as Julie was saying, on May 17th, the council member interviews with all 3 of them will be public, and I think perhaps even televised. So
it
those
is televised.
And are all the other ones closed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what time is that on the 15th?
On 15th, that's 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. in the Justice Center lobby.
Where are you reading this?
It's on the front page of the city's website.
Okay.
And then on May 17th, if anyone wants to follow along with the interviews themselves to hear the same questions that have been asked 4 times before, that's 9 a.m. to 12 a.m. Will that be in council chambers or?
The council one is in council chambers. Yes.
Okay.
And again, I'm guessing, and I apologize for not knowing the details. Do you know if all the groups are asking the same questions?
Yeah.
I thought they were, but we're not. I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
Pretty sure.
It just seems so odd that candidates are going to answer the same questions over and over and over and over. I wonder if each group is given
they will be asked, the questions that they get asked are going to be the same, of course.
Yeah, but I don't know if maybe we're asking certain questions.
That's what I'm
in other
wondering,
groups,
if
but
there's one list and it gets somehow.
I don't know. I'm
That's
sending
why I
a
asked
couple.
if they
I'm
were-
sending a couple. Emails.
That's why I asked if
Right.
they were validated, because typically what occurs when questions are validated, you have individuals who will ask a certain group, and then another person will ask the next group, or it'll rotate per question, however it's set up, so that ultimately everyone is asked the same question, but it's a different person, and then the others in the room are taking notes.
I mean, even if the questions are different for each group, like to some extent, I see how you could come up with like a good set of questions for some of the professional groups that are asking questions based on like what they're meant to assess for. But like when you're coming up with, community members or ICPOC, which was just seated, like who's coming up with the questions for them? Like how are we determining like what questions those groups are actually interested in and that represent those groups' concerns, especially if we don't even know who's on those groups.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, well, if you end up setting up a meeting with anyone, I'm sure there
Denise, is there a way of putting this together and asking the administration to get these kind of answers to the group?
I can ask for access to the questions posed to the candidates, and if they have been validated, see all the candidates who applied, who selected the community members and the groups. Anything else?
Well, and maybe whether Mr. Fournier or whoever has time to meet with some representatives of the HRC to talk about the process.
And if the questions are the same for each group.
And how the community member groups were chosen.
Yeah, how the community member group was chosen.
Okay.
And
Who's
also
on the community member panel?
Who's on it and how they were
Yeah.
chosen and who selected them.
I sent all that to
Okay, great. And also like how voting is weighted per group. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. If he gets it twice, it's.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's coming up next week.
Right, so we have to do it. soon.
Okay, I'll send it tomorrow.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
If no one else has any more comments on the police chief update,
And I'm sorry I missed the first part of the meeting. I was upstairs. I had another meeting that was conflicted.
the next item for discussion is conversion therapy.
Right. Sorry, that was a lot about the police chief. All right. So I was able to forward the court decisions that address freedom of speech and freedom of religion concerns so that people would have some idea of how those are still protected, how pastors can still practice it, and how it really is just a limitation on professionals holding themselves out to be performing something that is scientific, so to speak, and that because it is not accepted professionally, it is not something that people should be holding themselves out as doing. And outside of that, you can totally do what you want to do as from a perspective of religion, right? So I forwarded those court decisions to the commissioners, and like I said, the state laws have been upheld against those challenges. I also forwarded some sample language from some localities in Ohio, because I know that we were provided some sample language from the law student, and ultimately the city attorney will draft proposed language. But I think that we wanted to see whether there would be more simplistic language that might work better for our community than what we received from the law student.
Just to give some context for whoever's listening about what this is about, we're considering.
Oh, sorry. So conversion therapy, for those of you who don't know, it is basically an attempt by a therapist to change someone's sexual preference or gender identity. And there are there are some states and many localities who already have ordinances that prohibit any form of conversion therapy within their community, and our goal is to see whether Ann Arbor should adopt an ordinance that prohibits any professionals from performing any type of conversion therapy within our community. And so that's sort of what we're looking at, and we were provided a memo from a U of M law student, forwarded it to us by the mayor, and we reviewed it, and we discussed it briefly at the last meeting, and I forwarded some case law so that we would be aware of how freedom of speech and freedom of religion concerns have been dealt with, because there have been challenges brought in other states. And I also forwarded some language from, I think, Cleveland, and what was the other city?
Cincinnati and Toledo.
Oh, Cincinnati and Toledo. Okay, Cincinnati and Toledo, because like 6 to 8 cities in Ohio already have ordinances banning conversion therapy, so why can't we, right? And we would be the first locality in Michigan to do this if we chose to do it. So I don't know if anyone had a chance to look at any of that, or if anyone had any comments.
No, it's really interesting.
Or thoughts.
Do you know if anyone's done a real exhaustive search of all the case law? Just to make sure that so far it's all.
I shepherdized them, but
Okay.
I haven't.
I was just
beyond that.
wondering if it was, okay, no, it's great. And we don't know if it's been challenged in Ohio, like this particular Cincinnati ordinance that you sent us. Okay.
No. And I don't think that they have, but also I think we're waiting at this point to hear from the city attorney, because we provided this
this
to
is
them.
great.
And
this is great.
I thought one would be here tonight. Did she say she wouldn't?
Who are we talking about?
Margaret.
Oh, she's
definitely not.
indisposed
So
for a while.
Are we getting anyone else?
She's working
From the hospital.
medical care.
Medical
She's
care, right.
She's got 24-hour
Right.
medical care.
Right.
Yeah, so no, I don't think so. I think we're.
I don't know if you heard anything about.
No.
I mean, if she's not gonna show up to meetings, which is fine.
I think she watches them.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if you want to get in communication with her,
she's available.
She's available.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we need to let Margaret know that we want feedback, because from the city attorney's office on conversion therapy, any concerns the city attorney might have. I think we've looked into all of our concerns, but obviously some exchange with the city attorney would be helpful. And we've also been waiting for feedback on the source of income ordinance, which she said she was still working on last time we spoke to her. So.
Okay. Just to reiterate what I said last time, I'm recused from conversion therapy stuff. I have nothing to do with it. And haven't touched it. And did that count as your source of income update as well?
I don't have any new news on source of income. I haven't heard anything from Margaret. And I think that's where the ball is right now, is the city attorney's office, and whether they can draft some language that will work within what we recommended. And so we would like to hear from Margaret or someone else in the city attorney's office.
Would you mind contacting Margaret and asking her if she's a person to still contact about these things, or if she's not, if there's someone we could direct this stuff to? Sure. Thank you. So that concludes old business. Moving on to new business. So back to our city council liaisons, the HR update, which is something that we're all very interested in learning more about.
So, I mean, we don't, you know, in terms of, I mean, the HR director was terminated. The reasons.
I think she resigned.
Well, sorry, I apologize. Resigned. The reasons for that resignation became readily apparent to the entire community. There's been a lot of concern by many members of council based on the content of those texts, which were upsetting, I think, to many of us. I'm sure they certainly were not complimentary to this group or groups that were working on community police oversight issues. For that, I know there have been a lot of questions about the extent of the former HR director's involvement with the police search. It appears, at least the responses we've received from staff have been that it was administrative and that she did not have any say in terms of the selection of candidates or the narrowing down of candidates. She didn't participate in interviews of the 12, I guess you'd call them semifinalists. So I know this group received some communication. We don't really know much more in terms of HR, but it does appear that, like I said, I'm part of the Council Administration Committee. We'll be meeting next week, and then the ICPOC is going to be brought in for a meeting related to some of those concerns as well. I don't know that we can answer much more. I don't know if you have anything to add.
I mean, obviously there's a new search for HR director that hopefully we'll have someone in place by the end of the year. John Fourier is the acting, and but it seems as if we do have a company that's handling the process for the police chief search. So I mean, I don't know how much influence she had in the role beyond the initial parts. Again, I apologize. I don't want to misspeak, so I don't want to say too much or too little. But it is an issue that's troubling, obviously, and one that we'll be looking at further. It's not just it's not over. We're going to see what extent it went to, but I guess we're all going to find out. There's a lot. It's all in motion still, so definitely too premature, too soon to comment. I think without really knowing everything.
There will be some internal processes that will happen as a result as well.
Sure.
In terms of just addressing the concerns
There'll
were
be
brought by staff.
An investigation of sorts, to find out what's going on.
But I think also some restorative actions that will be taken as well internally to try to.
Yeah, I don't know if that answered all the questions or concerns. I could anything more. I'm sorry, I will.
Yeah, I guess that my concern was that when I expressed an interest in, including this item on the agenda and having the Human Rights Commission, when a few of us expressed an interest in including this item on the agenda and talking about it as a body, the City Attorney's Office said that, they didn't believe that this was a human rights issue, and I think that it's a little interesting that ICPOC is having a special meeting that's being specially convened, like an emergency meeting, to discuss this following an emergency city council meeting. I think that this is a human rights issue. I think that this isn't the case where there are just like two separate circles, and one represents the HRC and one represents ICPOC. There is significant overlap, and if this is an issue that's important enough for ICPOC to seat an emergency meeting and for City Council to discuss
on the police chief search on the process, correct? Is that
specifically? It was about the HR individual's resignation. That's and whether or not it may have impacted the search, but generally, how it impacted HR.
But that happened today, right?
What happened today?
The meeting.
The
Setting
meeting
up
is
of the
happening
meetings.
next week.
Right, but the meetings were set up
Just in the last
before
couple
we
of
set
weeks.
our
24
agenda,
hours.
right? I mean,
Sure.
it was, yeah.
Sure, by
Yeah.
direction of membership, certainly not without permission of, you know what I mean? Yeah.
But
So it's not like they could stop us, right?
It's
You
part of
know?
ICPOC's, purview to, weigh
Right.
in on that, so.
Sure.
Or I see it's as part of the HRC's purview as well.
So
Per the ordinance, per the HRC ordinance,
It's a
If I'm
human
not
rights issue. I
mistaken,
don't see.
she definitely made comments about black people, and we enforce the non-discrimination ordinance.
Based on
Just
race.
like
but
Human
I'm
Rights
sorry, I'm
Commission.
conflating both the police chief
Yeah.
and her.
Right,
And
right. And so we were told that they didn't think it was a human rights issue, and
Oh.
so we
No,
decided
no.
to discuss it anyway today and decide whether we
Yeah.
thought
No,
it was
it's
a human
definitely a
rights.
human rights issue.
Right, that seemed kind of, of course it is. I mean, she's making statements, and of course they want to assure us that this is not, the way this doesn't reflect the, HR division itself or the other members, but we should totally be concerned, and, then we should look into it, right?
Even if we were just talking about the impact on the police chief search, I don't see why that isn't a human rights issue. It's something, policing has been the major focus of this body for the past few years. And to the extent that Leslie is sitting as a community member who is voting on some of these police chief candidates, it's because she's the chair of the Human Rights Commission, is it not? So I don't understand why there's this arbitrary divide between what we are allowed to care about and what ICPOC would be allowed to care about. Even if we were just talking about the police chief search and what the HR resignation had to do with how it affected the police chief search, I think that it's something that concerns this body as well, and that we would still like to be updated on.
I mean, that information is out in the community, right? And it certainly touches upon issues that would be of concern to this commission from my perspective. So I think it is appropriate that we discuss it. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think we share that. I don't share
Yeah.
that it's not a human rights commission issue, a human rights issue.
I would have been really surprised if we didn't talk about it.
In that context.
Okay, I'm just expressing the desire for this body to be kept abreast of any developments the same way that ICPOC is.
Yeah.
Because it seems like ICPOC is very interested and is getting potentially more information and more updates, and I think this body should as well.
Yeah, I think
We
things
are
are just
not,
happening,
though, just to be fair.
these are all just very recent, developments, and, council members don't have the information that you wish to have.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those issues, and that's all that I can say to it. We don't have things that you would expect us to have as well.
Right, and I did propose that, perhaps Lazarus be present at this meeting, and, obviously we didn't get him, we got an email saying that they didn't think it was a human rights issue. I don't know whether Lazarus will be present at the emergency meeting. Do we know what city staff might be present?
Staff, yes.
Okay, so it does look like ICPOC is going to get staff at their meeting.
Is Lazarus the HR director supervisor?
Yes.
Yes.
So the obvious question is, and for discussion, is to what extent was this tolerated and known by Lazarus?
Lazarus is relatively new compared to the
I'm
HR
just saying,
person.
right? So this, one can imagine
How
that
long
this
has
kind
it
of
been?
pattern of behavior, this kind of person who, based on the evidence, is a bully, is vulgar, and based on the evidence, looks like a racist, is being tolerated by their supervisor.
I don't know that we have any information that people in the city were aware of this. But I know
It just,
that
my
yeah,
point is that
Mr.
one,
Lazarus.
how can one necessarily hide those kinds of characteristics over a 10-year period?
Yeah. I don't
Well,
know.
Mr. Lazarus has been here for about 2 years, is it? It's
Yeah.
continued
2 years in
But
July.
that is a question, I think, great question, one that needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
one that needs to be taken seriously.
Right, because the obvious question to me is, is there a tolerance? And what I understood from what I've read too is that it was known that the employees under this HR director were in turmoil. Is there any truth to that? I sort of read between the lines.
I think we had indications over the years because our support staff, before Denise came on, we've had a revolving door of people from HR. And so I think we've heard whisperings without really.
Right, so there's a pattern then of supervision
Yeah.
of that department not believing or caring about the climate, the
Yeah.
toxic climate of the HR department.
Could be.
And not addressing it. So in other words, that translates then to a tolerance of bullying behavior within an Ann Arbor department. And it feels to me, based on what I read of her text comments, like a betrayal, frankly, to the community, that that kind of behavior, first of all, existed, and second of all, was tolerated.
And one needs evidence to
Right.
substantiate these things.
And
right?
I have spoken to somebody who worked closely with her for many years and doesn't think this is being characterized in a fair way to her. That maybe, it's hard to read it and understand how it couldn't, but I'm just speaking on somebody who in the city worked very closely with her for a long time. And saw another side of her that wasn't depicted here, so.
I mean, I can tell you my own interactions never personally gave me any evidence, but I was in a position of authority, right? So I can't say that. I know that just from having worked in organizations that HR is generally not the most beloved department. So I think it can be, hard. Present, right. I think Pam would substantiate that, right? That it's, that often, these are the bearers of policies that people don't like, and so it, yeah. I think it, it can be hard to hear grumblings about HR, which one hears in a lot of organizations, versus the really clear evidence that came out that made it clear that this was absolutely, and I don't mean to diminish it, right, absolutely unacceptable. But, you don't.
It's hard to know.
Yeah.
And it seems like there will be, again, an investigation on what happened, how long was it tolerated for, and I don't think all the information is out yet, and I think there will be an investigation to answer more of these questions.
Do you know, or will you learn if that investigation will be internal?
We're trying to, we're trying to make it external if we could.
I would think that would be wise, just because that in essence speaks to why we work so hard to have a police oversight commission, for the simple reason we don't believe that you can.
Fox watching the hen house.
Exactly.
It was my understanding it was also going to be bringing in someone external from the organization.
Yeah. So along those lines, what I read and what I hear being stated this evening, along with the comment, I don't want to call it a statement that it's not an HRC issue. I just want to reiterate the comments that my colleagues have made, that I firmly believe that it is. And to the extent that I think that we should have some direct involvement in that whole process. Not only because that's why we, in essence, exist, to address issues in areas when and where we find disparate or unlawful treatment, but that we seek in many ways to eradicate that. And given our collective experience and what we do on a daily basis, I think we would be well positioned to be effective in that overall process, if not for any other reason than just our input. Not that we're trying to take over or direct the efforts, but certainly it falls within our purview as indicated in our ordinance, and what we have taken on the responsibility as volunteers in discharging that. So I want to communicate that in the strongest language possible, that the HRC should be involved.
I would,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I came here late. I'm just trying to get up to speed, and I just want to make clear that I was conflating a couple things when I had misspoken a little earlier. But I do believe in what everything you just said.
yeah. And if you are going to have a meeting with Mr. Fournier, then I think you can just add to your agenda for that meeting. I find him incredibly responsive, and I think he's been an excellent hire for the city, so.
He's the assistant administrator.
Yes.
I'm just wondering if there, other than adding it to the agenda of the committee who's agreed to try to meet with Lazarus or Fournier, whoever, and get some kind of response, whether there's any other kind of formal action we can take to make it clear that we believe this is a human rights issue and that we intend to engage it as such, whether it be a resolution, opening a formal investigation. It's maybe premature at this point, like what formal action can we take, or should we consider taking, depending on what we find out from the meeting. Does anyone have any ideas, experience in this area?
I guess I would think, let's see what the city does first, since this is all brand new and they say they are investigating, and let's see how much of that they make public. And, I mean, I don't know.
But if we don't actively make ourselves available, then you don't get invited to the table. They're just like, oh
Right.
yeah, we already cooked
right.
and we already ate
Okay.
and it was good, right?
Well,
and they just want us to co-sign it. So
we
should
can,
we?
We can express this to either in an email or in person if we meet with.
And I think it's perfectly appropriate for this group to formally declare in some form that this is a human rights issue and what your concerns are. I don't think that's inappropriate at all.
In the form of a resolution?
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's a stronger statement, and I think that it will also prevent them from making such a, I don't know, it's kind of flippant, statement
It's
under
hard
the
to know if that was,
circumstances.
I would worry too much about reading
We'll call it
one line
flippant,
of an email,
but-
which also had a lot of other information about trying to clear up what her role was or wasn't in the police chief process. This came from one, I don't know how heartfelt that was. So maybe we should clarify with the writer first, but also we can do the resolution.
We don't have to attack the writer.
Yes,
I'm not
because
going to
I think
attack
she
the writer,
was,
but it is,
you know,
I think we should declare
Yeah,
that it
that's
is.
fine.
I think that's what we're here for. I think it's, I think we should do it. It doesn't have to be a long resolution, but I think, good
Okay.
5 sentences would do.
To go on record.
Yeah, to make sure that message is communicated, and also a message to the people who work in HR who might have things that and feel like they don't have anyone to turn to.
Any voice.
Yeah, and to let them know that we are here. If they have complaints, because even though we exist, sometimes employees
And I would say
forget.
the city, employs overall.
Yeah.
I know I'm not supposed to speak, but I have to say something. When you had an human rights office, which I worked at one time in the 60s, these were things that the office was involved in. So I don't know how any city council person or anybody else could say that you should not be involved, because in what I read, and I thought there's already been an investigation before she was asked to resign, that she has said things about black people being moved up or even hired. So that automatically brings you back into it. Even though you don't have an office, you have a commission that is to protect us.
We haven't had an external investigation. We haven't had an external investigation. An internal one, perhaps. Obviously, they came to the conclusion that, of her termination or resignation, obviously.
Sure.
But having an external investigation hasn't begun yet.
Sure, but I take Shirley's points as being the fact that, there is considerable overlap between policing and, human rights, obviously. And that, I think, it's going to be something that the Human Rights Commission needs to be aware of moving forward, that there is this new body now. and that it's not just that everything relating to policing can be shunted off to the separate body, and we can just wash our hands of all of that and say that that's someone else's responsibility. It's still our responsibility as well, and I think that that's something we need to be aware of moving forward. That it's not two separate bodies with two separate jurisdictions. That there's overlapping jurisdiction. And that concludes it for the HR update for now.
Can I just ask for one clarification?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, just to be clear, she is not receiving severance pay, is that
No.
correct?
No.
I believe
No.
that's correct.
No. Yeah.
I think the information that I read was chronologically a subordinate employee brought to the attention the conduct that this individual engaged in, which resulted in Mr. Lazarus putting her on paid leave of absence. Then the text messages came to light, and she was presented with that, and through her attorney, so I'm simply quoting what was written, she resigned. Had she been terminated, she would have been entitled to 9 months severance pay. But because she resigned, she forfeited that.
Correct.
So is somebody volunteering to draft this 5-line resolution?
I will draft.
I mean-
I'll draft the resolution, send it out to just the subcommittee members before we send it out to everyone else.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you guys for helping me write that.
Thank you.
I'll help you. Moving on to the status of any complaints that we've received.
So we have a current one, and historically we don't divulge confidences, but just know that we do have a new complaint that was received late last month. I've taken the lead on it, but I've also involved Linda, Corrine, and Leslie, which we historically do because we discuss it amongst ourselves. And currently, I'm acting on some additional information that Corrine shared with me. So right now, it's currently being investigated. I don't like to put a timeline on when we'll finish because there's another piece of it that we're actually bringing into it. Just know that we have received a complaint that is race-based against a respondent in the city of Ann Arbor.
And it was formalized into a written complaint, as I recall.
Yeah, we received that in our email, so we actually have that. It's just the form, so
Yeah.
the details are what I emailed to you.
Yeah.
And then we're acting on the recommendation of involving yet another organization.
Oh, okay. Yes,
So-
yes.
And for just so you know, so that it's not so vague, the other organization that we're asking to become involved in is Fair Housing to conduct testing as it relates to the complaint and the allegations that have been brought to our attention.
Right, and just because Margaret may be watching, or will be watching soon, we did forward a copy to the city attorney of the initial complaint for our procedure, right? Once we got the written complaint.
Did we?
Well, you asked me and I said that we do at this stage.
Yeah.
We referenced the policy.
Yeah.
Okay, so you did.
Mhm.
Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
that was done.
Yeah, just historically you do, right? You forwarded all of our
I
complaints.
usually, but I did not in this case,
Okay.
so this is, this is the first time we've had Denise here, so.
Right.
Probably
Denise should
sometime
take the lead on
soon, we
that.
should sit down and revise our procedures for handling complaints.
Okay.
And if Denise, you have time, I don't know how busy you are now.
I can make time.
Try to standardize it in a different way now that we have help.
Mhm.
So,
Right,
yeah.
but we did reference the policy, so we
Mhm.
forwarded it
Yeah.
because it was
Okay.
done.
Okay.
But absolutely, we should meet with Denise and show
Yeah.
her the
Yeah.
procedure
Mhm.
and try to
and work
put her,
through it, yeah.
implement her.
See what she thinks about where she wants to fit in, yeah.
Right, and there should be another complaint coming to us formally. I think we received what could only qualify as an informal complaint. And hopefully we will be receiving a formal complaint soon.
Yeah.
And you don't know about it yet, I don't think.
Okay.
But hopefully that one will come to us.
That's separate from the one.
It's separate from
Okay.
this one, yeah.
Before you go on, did we, and I didn't, the minutes say that we still need to finalize the annual report, and
Yeah, I don't know that,
I think we sort of did last time.
I
but-
think we did too.
Yeah, but,
What's
so
in the
just
minutes?
because it said in the April minutes that we were going to talk about it in the May meeting, it
might be
maybe we
good
should
to-
just say, is everybody okay with it, and
Okay.
Yeah, so I would amend the, would
the
someone,
agenda.
yeah, would someone like
Yeah.
to move to amend the agenda to include
Sure.
consideration
Yeah.
of the annual report?
Sure, I move to amend the agenda to include a discussion of the annual report.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, well, we saw it last time, and we voted on it last
Yeah,
time.
so,
We're still waiting to do the contractor's report, so that might have been where we got the
I don't
confusion.
know.
Do both of them have to be submitted at the same time? or-
No, and they historically haven't been.
Okay.
We were waiting on the data from the, I think his title is city purchaser, I'm not sure.
Mhm.
And we received that data, and then with Leslie being gone, we're compiling that data, so we've actually pushed back submitting that information until the summer. But it will be forthcoming.
Would you be comfortable if we voted on the annual report today?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
because it's separate.
Okay,
But I think the annual report references the contractor report.
okay.
Yeah.
It's fine, yeah,
Yeah, well,
yes.
motion to?
Sure, I move that we adopt as revised last meeting, the annual report and the attached spreadsheet of complaints.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, that brings us to Commissioner Communications. I'd also like to just reiterate for anyone who's in the audience right now that there is a public comment section at the end of this meeting too. And so we added that in case anyone wanted to speak at the end of the meeting. So if anyone wanted to speak at the end.
Can I just have a quick communication?
Sure.
So just an FYI to this group, I met with a constituent of mine in the last couple of weeks, and also a colleague of hers who works on issues for formerly incarcerated citizens that are returning to the community and difficulties that they have finding rental housing. So ACLU is working on some language to potentially make that easier. We had a good conversation, so I will be bringing, once the ACLU gets me language, I'll be sending it to the attorney's office and also hopefully bringing it to this group for consideration to send it on to council.
Great. Thank you.
Cool. I was very excited.
Before opening up public comment again, I also had a communication to share myself. So as I understand it, 3 of us commissioners have terms that expire at the end of this month, May 31st, and I believe they were Mohammed, Linda, and myself. And after resubmitting my application to be considered again to serve on the Human Rights Commission, the mayor has unfortunately informed me that he will not be forwarding my application to City Council for consideration. So I believe that this may be my last Human Rights Commission meeting as both vice chair and commissioner. And I wasn't given any reason or explanation as to why my application was not being considered. And, you know, after serving on this body for the past few years, and engaging in, you know, issues of policing and the task force, it's work that I found to be really meaningful, if not particularly enjoyable sometimes. And I really regret the fact that I will have to stop my service to the city at this, I think, important juncture where we are learning to work with the ICPOC on a lot of really important issues. Yeah, and so this is my last meeting.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry as well.
Thank you for all your hard work
Yes,
that you
absolutely.
put into
And your leadership on the
everything.
police issues.
And we hope to see more of you whenever you're willing to come and give us some insight. We always appreciate everything that you've done.
Thanks, Mary. With that, if anyone would like to speak at public comment, the floor is open.
I just have a question. When I hear you respond to Vivian's announcement, do you have no power or agency in terms of your colleagues and their service on the commission? In other words, do you just have to accept that? So that's a question I'm very curious about.
Historically, we do not have any. Historically, we have no input into applicants, the decision to select or recommend for this commission. I don't know if that is true for others, but I know for this one, we, as commissioners, I can speak personally for myself, my experience is that I applied, as is required of all who want to sit on any commission, by completing an application that's online. I was not notified that I was selected to even be on this commission, and that was 5 years ago. Initially, I was appointed by the former mayor, Mayor Heafji, for a 1-year term. And then I was reappointed under Mayor Taylor for a 3-year term, and then that was again during that time, they standardized the appointment times for at least this commission, I think it's all, so that all appointments are in May annually, and they're either 1-year or 3-year terms. I believe that's the same that governs for the new ICPOC as well. So no, to answer your question, we have no input into the decision of who is selected. We can certainly ask individuals to submit applications, but the ultimate decision, my understanding, is that of the mayor. He may or may not consult with other council persons. They can respond to that. But my experience was that I was appointed, and I was contacted by the chair and advised that she had been notified that I was appointed, which is how I came on board.
I'm not
Council
asking about
approves the
initial
mayor's.
appointments. I'm asking about an appointment, it's a reappointment. It's a continuation of a person who has served, you know, apparently effectively, and who has said they want to continue to serve at a time when experience and historical connection would be really critical. So, you know, maybe this hasn't happened before and it's a first thing, but I would just encourage you to stand up for each other if you think somebody's been effective. So, but anyway, I don't want to hog the public comment. There's other people here.
Yeah, I came here tonight understanding that Vivian was not, after an incredible service, so I'm coming here to thank you for your service and for your leadership. I'm incredibly disappointed and surprised to hear that this continuation is not happening and that it's not going to be, that I'm hoping that's going to be contested in some way. And I want to say, just even sitting here tonight, your incredible dedication and commitment to community. You're the person who raised the question about how community members are being chosen on the search committee for on the interviews for the police chief, and how those questions are being done. Like, that's an incredible level of commitment on the community that makes me trust what's happening here. Asking for the context, when folks started talking, understandably you're in a meeting, but your commitment to the community understanding what the conversation is about and pausing and saying, what is the context here? Because your job is to serve the community. And then you raising also, very importantly, the fact that the HR, the racist and absolutely intolerable and apparently, as the gentleman here said, tolerated pattern of racism in our city offices is a human rights issue and needs to be covered by the Human Rights Commission. So just sitting here, the amount of leadership that you have shown in one meeting is crucial to me. I also want to say you are, as I understand, the only Asian on the commission. We have what, over 15% of Ann Arbor is Asian. It's one of the fastest growing populations. No representation in terms of discrimination issues. You have an incredible background in terms of gender and sexuality discrimination. It's a crucial piece, we all know right now in this time, and to lose someone with that kind of experience. You're younger than a lot of the folks. We need leadership from younger people, and we need the continuity of leadership over time. And I have to say, for me, as a Ward 3 person who lives and votes in Ward 3, again, we have incredible leadership and representation of Asian merchants and families. And again, the idea that there's no one on the Human Rights Commission who has a background in and perspective from Asian communities is kind of outrageous. So I just want to say I came here to thank you, Vivian, and to express my incredible disappointment and outrage that what is apparently an unusual move that people are not allowed to continue, and I don't understand why that's happening. So, thank you.
I just want to clarify that while I agree with your statements about Vivian, that I identify as biracial, that includes Asian as well.
Oh, thank you. I did not know that. Appreciate it.
Shirley, did you want to add something?
You go ahead.
I just want to, Julie, thank you so much for sharing all of that, and I really echo all of that, both as a community member and as a former police task force member, and also as a racial equity professional, to see both the patterns that we've seen at the city, both from the HR director, but also the resistance and engagements that we had as a police task force between the city leadership. This to me falls in line with some of that history and patterns. And I actually would ask that commissioners and city council people actually interrogate this deeply and ask questions and go to Mayor Taylor and ask him specifically why this is happening and actually demand something different. This is unacceptable, it's intentional, and it is very clear what's happening to me. It's clear that you've been vocal, it's clear that you do your job, it's clear that you hold this institution accountable, and apparently that's too much. So I want to make the demand and request that you all make each other uncomfortable, and that you go to leadership and ask what's going on and to request something different than that, which is to keep Vivian on, obviously. So thank you, Vivian, and I really hope and expect actually that you continue.
Thank you. I'd like to say as a Ward 3 resident that I would hope that you would look into this.
I'm in Ward 3 as well, and I would agree with that.
I'm gonna scoot my chair because I got some things to say, so I need to sit down as an old lady. First of all, I hope as a Human Rights Commission that you will, I'm looking forward as someone in this community that's been here as long as I have and who has worked for this when we had an office, human rights, that you would at least, if you're not going to investigate, write letters, and those of you, you should as a body support her. And it should not matter that she disagrees with the mayor or council. I think we're supposed to be able to have freedom of speech and thought. And as someone that knows personally that if you disagree with him, you get kicked and get your knees cut off. And I can accept that,
as someone from the community, but I think it's because I can still work from the community and do my job, but I think it's very important that she stays on here and represents those of us that have little voice in the community. And if we do have voice, then we're sort of shut down. Those of us that will let him shut us down. I'm not going to let him shut me down as a person that has the right to speak. The other thing, so I hope that this, and I look forward to you all. You have attorneys on here. You have Pam, who has worked as a civil rights person for the state. You have a good commission here. And so me as someone in the community depends on this commission to help us fight the ills that are out here in Ann Arbor. So I would hope that we would keep Vivian here to help us. There are those of you on this commission that also speak up, but we've even lost one of your commissioners, which is Dwight. And I know that he felt really kind of bad about having to, but it seems that if you stand up and speak, then your life is made a little more difficult. This commission needs to do and say something about that as a commission. If you're truly here to protect the rights of us citizens that live here, if that's what your job is, which I think it is, but if you personally think that's what it is, that's what you ought to be doing. The other thing I want to address, so hopefully we can keep you. But if we can't keep you, we'll take you from outside and we'll work from the outside in. So I welcome you to come to us from the outside in, if we can't keep you. The other thing I want to address in listening to you all tonight, we talk so much about transparency. And I'm listening to you all tonight trying not to be too transparent. And how are we going to deal with the issues that face this city if we're not transparent? The city council people that are liaison people here, you don't seem to know what's going on. Or if you do know, you're not sharing. So that's not being transparent to us. The fact that we didn't know as a whole about the Police Oversight Commission meeting on the 30th, that's not transparent. You talk about, well, it was kind of a rush and it was kind of this and that. I can remember having a meeting about the task force and getting calls in the morning from city council people. So I'm not accepting that you can't get together in the morning and do something before 5 p.m. So I know it can be done because it has been. I just hope, as someone from this community who depends on this commission to speak for us and help us to make things right and to create this transparency that we so want, that some kind of way you city council people that are our liaison people will listen to us a little better. We do matter. And it just feels so awkward that we're not being heard. And we've been nonviolent and we've been angry and we've shouted out, but that's the only avenue that you leave for us when things don't go in a peaceful way for us out here. And we do have to deal with the police. And even though we know that all police aren't bad, we still have issues. I was at the Blake and watched the police talk to a man that was, I could tell he had mental issues. And to issue him a trespass, and he thought he was under arrest. And they didn't explain that he wasn't under arrest. I had to tell him he wasn't under arrest. Then I have the police officer tell me, oh, I know who you are. You go to the city council meetings. That's kind of intimidating. if you're someone that can be intimidated. So this body, I'm saying all this to say this body is the only body we have to come to make these corrections, to help not only those of us that are aware, but the community out here that has no idea what's going on. And he didn't know how he was going to get to his classes at Washington Community College if he couldn't ride the bus. So we got all kinds of things going on out here. So I just want you to know that I look towards you all as the ones that are our workers and our movers and our shakers to help us in the community make things right. I should not have been here as long as I have and fight as long as I have to make things right, and then we seem to be going backwards and things are so wrong. So I appreciate you, and we need you. And so I just ask that you please, some kind of way, open up your hearts and listen to us and help us so that we can have this commission, and this commission also help our city council people. Thank you. And Vivian, I do hope in some kind of way we can keep you, because you are an asset to this commission. So thank you very much for the time. I also would like to say, in doing your I don't want to say, one of the things you need to do is have maybe once every 3 months, I would like once every couple months, but at some kind of way, have us be able to ask you questions and join in with you instead of having to wait and talk in the beginning. And we've done it a couple times, but it just seems like when we have critical issues going on, we should be able to talk with one another together instead of having to wait a special time to talk. So as the Human Rights Commission, I'm asking and requesting that. Thank you.
So, I mean, Vivian is our current city vice chair. I did go to the mayor, and I asked him 8 times to reappoint her. And at this point, I think that it would be fitting that we submit a recommendation on HRC letterhead recommending that she be reappointed. I don't know that there's any reason not to. I think that a few of the community members explicitly said it, absent negligence, irresponsibility, incapacity, if someone is willing to serve, has served, and has done that well. And I think that she has done that well, and we see that the community agrees that she has done that well, that we should be as supportive as possible. And I think that we should send, a recommendation on HRC letterhead or in the form of a resolution to both the mayor and to council, who would need to approve her if, he brought her name forward, recommending that she be reappointed. I don't think we have anything to lose.
I agree.
I think you have a lot to lose if you don't. I believe you have a lot to lose if you don't.
I would agree. I mean, I've only been on this body a couple of months, but Vivian's incisive contributions are critical from my view.
And it seems like now's the time for the continuity. It's so important to have the continuity that she brings to the committee, or to the commission. It's really important for her to be there at this critical juncture. And it's a little shocking that it's like, what the heck's going on?
It has happened before, just for the
Anyway,
record.
has
It's
this
not just
been-
Vivian.
Could I comment again? Wow, that made me feel a lot better. It was extremely painful to receive your announcement, Vivian. And I mean, I'm imagining how all of the rest of you received it sitting here. And I think I realized in listening and then in hearing Corinne rally you as a body to support one of your own, it became clear to me that the problem that makes me the most uncomfortable about it is one person having that amount of power to not even bring the application to council for a vote. So council is there for a reason. You are here for a reason as a body, and it's so that we can have the benefit of all of you coming to decisions. I can accept if you're not voted on by council, but it's hard for me to accept that you are not even given that opportunity, given your record, given your desire to serve, and given that there would then be 2 empty places, and how many people have the history and how many then don't on this council commission at this time. So the task force worked very, very hard to change that protocol. We did not want one person, no matter who it is, no matter what that person's persuasion is, to be the decider about who would be on the Police Oversight Commission. That needed to be a wider base of ideas and experiences weighing in on that. It was critical. And that's where what I find the most problematic. And if it means challenging something that is written, then isn't that our job? There was a time when there was a law that men had a right to beat their wives because the wives were their property. It was the law. So just because it's the law or just because it's in the ordinance doesn't mean that we shouldn't look at it, re-examine it, and try to make it better. So thank you for being who you are to us. Thank you especially to Vivian. And thank you to all of you in support of that.
So who will help me draft this? Again, this
Someone
one-
else should have to.
No,
Doing
it's
too much.
okay. Work with me. I've got nice bullet points already. Thank you, Diana. Philip and Diana.
We're all here to
You're
help
not allowed
too.
to help Vivian,
Yeah.
but yeah. All right, thanks. So we'll get that one out really quickly.
It needs to be a second.
Well, thank you everyone for your support. If there's nothing else to cover, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Can I just say a few things? I got here late, I apologize for that. But this last council meeting, I'm sure many members in the audience and on the commission here know by now that I have replaced Zach Ackerman as the liaison for the ICPOC. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that, and that it's a heavy lift, obviously, but I'm honored to be in that position. I have a lot to learn. I have a lot to listen to and learn from my elders and people that are experienced and people who come with a lot of life experience and make sense of it all. So, like I said, I just wanted to go on record, and it's been interesting and growth. It's been a growth spurt. So I don't know if anyone has any questions or anything like that. I just wanted to put that out there right now as it is an important part, obviously, and just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. And
I have a question. I'm struck by the amount of responsibility that it is to be a liaison for both this commission and that commission. And I also see that broadening council representation would be an advantage to the bodies and to the community. So what is the plan?
I think the plan is to phase myself out of here, you know, and someone else, because I believe that's the right thing to do. And there's been discussion about that, so most likely be phasing myself out, and someone else be most likely phasing themselves in.
Well, that's our loss.
Well, it'll be a
Makes-
gain, and
that
I think
makes
there'll be twice as much effort being put forth on it, because there is a lot of overlap.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, Laura's point is right.
So there'll
Probably
be-
not till we re-up council
Yeah, so,
appointments next year.
but that's, again, council's decision. I can't make that decision on my own, and so I don't want to abandon my responsibilities. But once council, comes to a consensus on that, and that'll be. But yeah, that's the goal.
Glad to hear it.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And and I know that people were concerned about, the when we met for the first time to convene the commission, the Police Oversight Commission, what day to pick, what time. I mean, I was part of those discussions, and it's like, okay, when is everyone available? When is the rooms available? What day can we put? Let's start a day that we can keep as the same day and time, consistently. And getting 11 people together at once, plus your council liaisons, is very difficult these days to get that kind of scheduling put together. It was that meeting probably occurred, I think, a week prior. It was a publicly noticed meeting, obviously. Obviously wasn't done with much time ahead, maybe a week's notice. But there was no nefarious reason as to why, or it was done as we need to get this going. Police chief, this needs to be a part of the police chief interview process, and we need to get this set. We need to get going. We need to get to business, and I think that is going to be the time and date where we meet for the rest of the year. It'll be Tuesdays, the fourth Tuesday at 5 o'clock in City Council chambers. So hopefully, members can come and be a part of that. And so we just wanted to find a date, time that would be consistent and work for everybody.
If you ever want to get the word out, you can just let one of us know.
Okay. So, well, that is good to know, and definitely be, obviously, you only do that once, that initial one. And so, but it's going to be the same date and time, fourth Tuesday at 5 o'clock, City Council chambers.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
That was what I said.